No shame.
Music stop. All right. Sounds like we're beginning. Good afternoon, everyone. It's not school, you don't have to say. Good afternoon, doctor. Anyway, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Daniel Cunnama. I am the Science Engagement Astronomer at the South African Astronomical Observatory.
I'm Dr. Jacinta Delhaize, and I am a researcher and lecturer at the University of Cape Town, where I do radio astronomy, studying galaxy evolution.
And joining us today, as you know, is Adriana Marais. Welcome, Adriana.
Thank you.
Maybe you can just introduce yourself a little bit.
Sure, yeah. It's great to be back in South Africa. I've actually been in China for a year, so thank you all for being here. You probably learn more about me than you should from the book. I think there's something about tequila in one of the first pages, so I thought it would be okay to have a glass of wine.
Cheers.
Yeah, we got given wine. I don't know if you guys got wine. But, so you can expect us to get increasingly entertaining as we go.
Speaking of entertaining, Dan and I host a podcast called the Cosmic Savannah, and we're going to blatantly plug it while we're here.
Yeah, so we were invited as part of the Cosmic Savannah team to facilitate today. So we run a podcast on African-centric astronomy, which is perfect for Adriana. So as I said, we're here with Adriana. We're going to be talking about her book. But maybe just to get started then, you can just tell us a little bit about why you decided to write this book.
So the day I started writing the book was in Mexico, in Guadalajara. The International Astronautical Congress was held there in 2016, I think it was. And Elon Musk came on stage, and there were thousands of people waiting outside, and then a stampede, and it was like, for a conference, this felt more like a rock concert. And we all sat, and this was the unveiling of SpaceX's plans to make humans multiplanetary. And there's even a section in the book on this. And there was a man standing on a stage, not asking for funding or permission, but actually saying he has not only the design and the technical capabilities, but also the budget, as one of the richest people on the planet at the time, and still to do this. And that was quite a remarkable day for me when I realized that this was potentially going to happen in our lifetime. So I went back to my room and then, started writing the book almost immediately. So it's been a long time coming. It's been hanging over me for almost a decade. So I'm really happy to get it out there. And I'd almost forgotten that people would read it eventually. So I'm really surprised and delighted that people have already read it. Some people have already read it. So wonderful. Yeah, great to be here.
So I don't know about what you got out of the book the most, Dan, but I have a question. What is the plural of octopus?
Me?
I don't know. What's the plural of octopus? Is it octopi? Octopuses? Octopi? Okay, we'll go with octopi. So one of the key things I got out of the book that I can remember is that octopi and magic mushrooms are probably aliens from space. So
expand.
Do you want to just tell us a little bit about the book? Give us your kind of your elevator pitch.
It covers quite a broad set of things, like starting with the Big Bang and then going all the way to thinking about prospects for humanity in the future. But I think it's not only about space exploration, it's more about life, the universe and our place in it. So no small task to try and get that into a digestible format, but I've interspersed some anecdotes and things along the way. I've been lucky to spend a long time studying all sorts of crazy topics, from quantum encryption to quantum biology, to more recently space science, and thinking about space technologies and life in space. So there is that detail in the book where I've tried to share some of the knowledge I've accumulated through the years. But more importantly, I think I was, through writing the book, trying to organize my thoughts. So I came to some conclusions, like while I was writing, about how to conclude a book like this. I usually tell this little story, so if you've heard it before, but I think a good way of encapsulating everything is, did you know that 10% of all of our bodies are as old as the universe itself? So hydrogen is not produced significantly in any other process that we know of besides the Big Bang. So the hydrogen inside the water molecules inside your body, more than half of our bodies are H2O, and that leads that 10% by mass of all of our bodies sitting here are around 14 billion years old. So I think the conclusion of the book is that by exploring space, we are really exploring ourselves, that we are in the universe and the universe is in us. It's not something separate to us. So the grand unity of it all is hopefully something I tie everything together with.
It's a good amendment to the Carl Sagan, "We are all stardust" quote. Actually, we're not all stardust. We're like half Big Bang dust.
Yeah.
True. The rest of the stuff is dust.
I'm not going to say that one again. Correction. It's very cool. And like you said, I mean, it's a wonderful introduction to the entire physics of the universe. From the Big Bang, talking about how the universe has formed and evolved and the elements have come into being, and then how that eventually forms into life. And, you mentioned now it's sort of how to wrap it up and make an endpoint to it, but I don't think it's the kind of book that has an endpoint. I think it's the kind of like book that is
it's
looking
the start,
forward.
Right? It's the
starting
start point.
Like where are we going from here? And I think that's one of the things you address. And talking about Mars, I think a lot of people here will know that you were part of the Mars One candidates. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that, and where do we go from here? We're here on Earth. We've been made. We've formed life, and we're doing other things here. But why is Mars the next step?
Yeah, so the Mars One project had a bunch of dates and proposals and visions. One of them was to leave for Mars on the one-way trip last year. So needless to say, that didn't go ahead. But 2024 was one of the main dates that the first 4 would depart on a one-way trip from Earth to Mars last year. So yeah, obviously that didn't happen. In fact, we haven't even been back to the moon in the meantime, but that is imminent. So where to next? So the Mars One project declared bankruptcy in 2019, but obviously that does not represent our ambitions for space exploration. That was just one startup that gained a lot of ground in terms of getting the public, getting all of us thinking and talking about the people that we knew that might have volunteered for the adventure, or just reading about it online or wherever we heard about it. But I think in South Africa, people did get people talking and thinking about, maybe for the first time, many people thinking about what it would be like to know someone who lived on another planet. So where are we going? We're not necessarily, it's not guaranteed that we expand beyond Earth to Mars, but we will need to evolve and advance, or we will evolve and advance as a society. So in what direction will we evolve or advance? And I think in the end, I'm maybe calling for a more conscious evolution, where we sit and think about what kind of culture we want to represent ourselves. And so now you can see there's a lot of topics interwoven here. So getting to Mars is not really the point, but through space exploration, we can accelerate a broader perspective, I think. So, for example, satellites give us a perspective of Earth. The first photo ever taken of Earth, the globe, from space was really like a sort of powerful psychological event for humanity, looking at the planet from afar. So that's a practical example of how space technology helps us to broaden our perspective about our place in the solar system or the universe. And so in the same way, if we can imagine further, knowing that some of our society is positioned on Mars, more than one planet, and maybe in the asteroid belt after that, knowing that the solar system is our home rather than Earth will again give us such a leap in the depth of the perspective that we have of our solar system, as well as all the technical capabilities that come with being able to live in harsh environments beyond the home where we've evolved so far. So I think exploring space is a powerful tool for advancement, whether it's on a technological level or on the level of just understanding our place in reality. It forces us to come to terms with not only thinking about technological challenges, but I think also challenges in our society, within the teams, for example, that would go and do these things. So there are just so many aspects, so many ways in which exploring space advances our knowledge and our capabilities, that I think this is an important aspect of our evolution as society. And in fact, it is exploring is what we've been doing as humans since we've been human. So it's really a natural continuation. Mars is further away than any place we've explored before physically ourselves, but in many sense there are strong parallels with the journeys that our ancestors made to unknown horizons in the past. So it's really just a continuation of being human, to explore, to be curious, and to advance our knowledge through exploration.
Yeah, I think that one other message that kind of shone through almost as your key argument of an extended sort of essay or extended argument throughout the book is that this concept of space exploration, maybe trying to make Mars habitable or find a way for humans to live on Mars or other planets or out in the solar system, actually almost the point of it, you argue, is to rid ourselves of the delusion that we are independent of nature, that that life isn't, that we don't have to care about nature, that we aren't part of it. Do you want to speak on that for a little bit? Also, kind of on that topic, I know your PhD was in quantum biology, and you make this really interesting connection between quantum physics and biology and our nature and life and interplanetary travel. I don't know if you want to speak on that for a bit.
I feel like I probably said it much more succinctly in the book, but let me give it a go.
You can grab your coffee off your coffee. Adriana will also be signing copies downstairs afterwards. There we go.
Perhaps I can ask
I just did the advert in the team. You had a drink.
Perhaps I can ask a more specific question. What exactly is quantum biology, and sort of what was your general PhD area?
So as living systems, perhaps we forget just how mysterious life is. So when we try to investigate sort of biology from a physics and chemistry perspective, a lot of mysteries remain. A lot of the knowledge that we do have about living systems has been gained through trial and error. For example, in the healthcare scenario or something like that. So in a simple way, we haven't yet produced life in the laboratory. Some people might say, oh, what are the ethics around that? But I mean, to understand something, we should be able to create it, be able to describe it first fully, and then be able to create this thing called life from the building blocks from which we know life is made. Of course, living systems are made up of molecules and atoms. So why have we been unable to describe life in terms of physics and chemistry? And I would say we have not yet done that. So we haven't yet understood what is life. So on the one level, I think this, perhaps we've lost touch with the kind of respect that we should have for this mysterious phenomenon called life. I mean, every breath we breathe in is full of spores and the microbes that are surrounding us all the time. It's difficult to even partition an individual from the environment around the individual because we've got so many other organisms that we share what we would call our bodies with. That it's, in fact, is it an individual at all with the plethora of other species that are cohabiting the space that we call our body? Okay, so life is complex, and we should respect it more. But we forget then that Earth's the only planet that we know of that's teeming with life. So I think looking at other planets and thinking about whether they have life on them is one way of reflecting just how precious and unique our planet is, which we of course forget when we going about our daily life, sharing as we do every day our daily lives with all the different species that we do. So quantum biology says that, well, maybe we're just not looking deeply enough into the molecules that make up living systems. Maybe there's some phenomena there that we haven't yet seen because we haven't been looking on a quantum level. So it's not necessarily going to be true that quantum physics can help us understand life. But when we look at life on very tiny scales, we do see the movement of single electrons, the movement of single photons, playing a role in processes that can result in the survival or the death of the organism. So in that sense, quantum objects like electrons and photons can impact processes that are vital for the survival or the death of that organism, and therefore quantum physics does play a role in life. But But I think the lesson here is that the deeper you look into something, the more questions arise, and that's normally the nature of things. Whether we're exploring space or looking inwards, the deeper we go, the more we realize we don't know. So quantum physics has not yet shed light on what life is, although Schrödinger and others have been wondering whether it may for almost a century now. But the learnings from quantum physics for biology, I think, will have great implications for healthcare in the future, also for looking at replicating processes like photosynthesis for highly efficient photovoltaics, for example, that mimic nature, maybe not made from rare metals, but from organic material, just like plants. So they've evolved away from abundant resources to grow structures that can absorb sunlight extremely efficiently and basically store that as fuel. So can we use, and these are quantum mechanical processes, we need quantum physics to understand how the average blade of grass absorbs sunlight. We do need quantum physics to explain fully what's going on there. So can we use those learnings to build better technologies, to perhaps like a revolution in healthcare by looking on very small scales how we can tweak certain processes within living systems. So that was a bit technical on quantum biology, but I think it just reveals the beauty of reality, that the deeper you go, the more questions arise. We're not sure what the next scientific revolution may be, or if there will be another one after our conversation before this. But what will the next step be? We don't know yet what that will be, but certainly doing research for the sake of research and asking fundamental questions about the nature of the things we see around us has been something humans have always done and will continue to do.
Maybe you can also just give a brief overview of quantum physics. So that no, don't. Sorry about that. It got you even? Okay. I dropped the book and I dropped my wine. Now we're entertaining. Okay. Excuse me. So yeah, I mean, thank you for that overview of quantum biology. I think that in terms of the question of where our next revolution comes from is a big one. And you mentioned at the beginning talking about space exploration and exploration as humans in general, like this drive we have to explore and to push. Maybe this is where space will come, and whether it's going to come from the small scales in terms of quantum biology, but like the next revolution may come from space. And you mentioned space exploration, like you mentioned that the Mars One project was due to launch last year, and timelines have slipped and things. But I don't think that the dream is gone. For those of you who do follow the Elon Musk and SpaceX and things, I mean, there was a very successful launch just last week. Maybe how do you feel about the current sort of expansion? Like, are we still on that track? I know you mentioned like where does the next revolution come from, but in a more forward-looking approach, I'm incredibly positive and optimistic about our chances of going interplanetary. What is your feeling?
So besides SpaceX and Elon Musk, who are endeavoring to build the transport systems, the Starship, which was successfully landed for the first time recently, China is also developing transport systems to take crew to Mars, and they are not bound to election cycles in the same way that the US is. And so I would say we are going to go...
For better or worse?
We are going to go, without going too political, I'll leave that at that. Let's first talk about the moon, because there will be people living on the moon by 2030. This is the current state of affairs. Whether the US is going to launch crew in orbit around the moon next year, I'm not sure whether they're going to adjust that date, 2026. But China has said that they will have crew living on the moon by 2030. And then, funnily enough, both the US and partners and China and partners are all planning to go to the same location, which is the lunar South Pole. So things should get interesting. And this is the coldest part of the moon, and the moon is already a very extreme environment. Without sunlight for 14 days during the lunar night, temperatures plummet to below negative 200 degrees Celsius. So it's a real challenge to not only keep the technology alive, but obviously eventually the crew too, hopefully. And at the lunar South Pole, this is the most extreme kind of place, or the polar regions on the moon are extreme, just like Earth. So why the lunar South Pole then? Well, because the permanently shadowed craters there contain water ice. So this being on the surface would be easy to extract because the crude bases would obviously need water as well as the hydrogen that forms the water and the oxygen for breathable air. Hydrogen is rocket fuel. And so this is a really precious molecule, not only for life, like microbial life, but also for sophisticated research bases. So this is the plan, and there'll be a lot of activity in the coming years to start to set up the infrastructure at the lunar South Pole if everything goes to plan. And then having demonstrated landing and, of course, a return to Earth from the moon, perhaps with the Starship or similar vehicle being involved, is a great a way to train and practice and get things right for going even further to Mars. So things do get easier on Mars, actually, rather than harder compared to the moon. The temperatures are not as extreme. The fluctuations don't go over as big a range because there's an atmosphere. Whereas on the moon you don't have that luxury. So on Mars you have access to the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere as a resource. Again, you've got the water ice that's in the sand that the Curiosity rover and other rovers have identified as making up around 2% of the sand. So yeah, the moon is an excellent place to get things right close to home. It's a one light second away, so easily integrable into communication networks, etc. with Earth. And a great place that we haven't taken advantage of in the past few decades in terms of having permanently inhabited research bases. So I think we can think of Antarctica perhaps and a similar kind of situation on the moon. But how the international cooperation, etc. will look remains to be seen, how the regulatory systems will emerge, because again we seem to be doing things before we've created the regulatory structures about what will and won't be allowed on the surface of the moon. We'll get there first and then make those regulations as usual. So whether you are participating in the space exploration or watching, I think it's going to be an exciting era in the next few years. And I mean, I'm talking about it flippantly, but this is a huge deal. So the Apollo astronauts landing on the moon and coming back was a visit, right? But putting up permanently occupied research bases on the moon is a huge milestone. It's taken 4 billion years, like 4 billion years of the evolution of the complexity of life on Earth to get to the point where we are able to now have a permanent presence on our most close celestial neighbor, the moon. But of course the Earth-Moon system is one, and so we can expect the politics and the economics of Earth naturally to be extended to the moon. I don't think we're going to see any revolutions on the moon in terms of economics. It will be the countries involved, running their regulations there. But when we get to Mars, maybe now you can see where I'm going, that then things will be different, because this is really the people who are there would create their own regulatory system, really. When it's like 10 light minutes away, decisions will need to be made locally, regulations would be made locally, enforcing regulations would be done locally. You can see how the moon and Mars are two very different places in terms of the society that may emerge on Mars compared to the crew on short rotations going to the moon. So that's where things really get exciting. And if China sticks to their date, 2033 could be the time when the first astronauts travel to Mars. What role does Africa have in all of this? Because we don't even have a continental astronaut training program at the moment. And that is something we're working on at the Foundation for Space Development Africa. We are the first organization from Africa to work with China. We'll probably talk about this in a sec. So we want to open up, really let other organizations in Africa know about the possibility of working with China. We're really proud to be part of this collaborative spirit with which China is doing space exploration. Maybe you had specific questions on that. I can tell you how our partnership works. But the next stage would be to collaborate with them on an astronaut training program also, so that Africa indeed participates in this exciting era.
So I do indeed have a question about this collaboration.
I could ramble on for ages.
with China. But first, if we put the internet on the moon as well, do we then have to rename it from the World Wide Web? What do we call it, guys? Okay, so you've talked about the Foundation for
Space Development
Africa, and your collaborations with China. And I know that you're the director of this project called Africa to Moon, which I'm very excited about as a radio astronomer. This is a project to put a low-frequency radio telescope on the dark side of the moon, where we don't get the interference from all of our mobile phones and radio stations and all of that on the Earth. Can you tell us more about the Africa to Moon project and the collaborations with China and what's going on there?
So I was really happy to be in this panel with Jacinta because I need to invite her to share her expertise with our project because we'll be doing science from the moon in radio astronomy. So my background is not in radio astronomy, and somehow I'm coordinating all the experts. So maybe I'll have some questions for you along the way. But the idea is that from the surface of Earth, signals below 10 megahertz are blocked and reflected and interfered with by the ionosphere, the atmosphere. So if you want to see between 0 and 10 megahertz, you need to go beyond the atmosphere to look. So we've had a couple of space-based telescopes that have looked in this frequency range, but the moon is an ideal place to see these low frequencies. And with the stable surface of the moon, we're doing an array, a telescope array made up of individual antennae that work together as an array, like the square kilometer array, you might be thinking, yes. And we are really happy to have so much expertise, mostly here in the Western Cape in South Africa, as a result of having built the precursor to the SKA and all the progress that's being made towards the full SKA. And these are the volunteer engineers who are helping us to build the telescope. So the technology demonstrator will be launched in 2029 as 3 antennae that work together and form an array. So effectively they form a bigger instrument than the balls themselves, which are 30 centimeter diameter. So the balls, there are lots of jokes about Carla's the mission director, Carla Sharp-Mitchell. She's worked at the SKA for many years in business development and many other aspects of the project. And she came up as an economist with this idea for these low-cost, low-mass, low-frequency balls that can work as a telescope and be low-cost, low-mass, etc., and form an effective larger instrument than the balls themselves as they roll onto the lunar surface and then collect signals from the universe, perhaps looking far back to the early stages of the universe. The technology demonstrator may not be sufficiently sensitive enough to do that yet, but we're just demonstrating the capabilities. So what we'll be looking at is the sun, the earth, and some other bodies in the solar system that are emitting in that frequency range. But science aside, this could be the first time that Africa's ever done anything first in space. Because the US put a radio telescope on the moon and it wasn't fully successful. China put a radio telescope on the moon, it wasn't fully successful. So now we stand in the running to perhaps have the first fully functional radio telescope on the moon. Also in the location where the bases will be built. So not only will we be doing science, but we'll also be understanding the lunar environment. In fact, the environment where the bases are planned to be constructed. So any data that we can collect on that side will be useful, like keeping the technology alive, the materials we use to build it, the kind of batteries we use to withstand these extreme temperature fluctuations. These are all important learnings towards building the bases and all of the activities that follow. So we're really excited that Africa's at the table for this. We got involved in this launch opportunity just having read China is offering free space in their Chang'e 8 mission. You apply, it was a rigorous sort of 2-year process to be selected, which we were selected in April in Shanghai. There was a big ceremony. And then you just realize, our project is just a small drop in the ocean of the really incredible things that China is able to achieve in the past few decades and plan for the next few decades. And so whether we're looking west or east, or whether we're hedging bets or whatever we may be doing, hoping for collaboration, I think it is an exciting era where we're not beholden to just one entity of power achieving these goals, but we do have a dispersed approach, and also I think the spirit of inviting countries who may not be developed enough to launch their own missions to space or not have the infrastructure to do that. China's launching university groups or organizations. We're a private non-profit launching our telescope of 15 kilograms to the moon, no costs involved. We just have to build it and test it and ship it.
Amazing.
Can I just geek out on radio astronomy for a second? Okay, just bear with me, please. Okay. So radio telescopes, right? Telescope, like things in space emit radio waves, which are a type of light, not a type of sound. That's a common misconception, okay? And a radio telescope, there's a few, they look like, not like what you'd expect, like looking through, a telescope.
Well, these ones, you're just going to open the box, and that was my question.
Yeah, wait,
and
I'm getting
roll
there.
the balls out.
I'm getting there.
Okay, go.
Gosh. So radio telescopes can look like a whole range of different things. A lot of the ones, like Meerkat, South Africa's telescopes, they look like big satellite dishes, right? Like 64 of them connected together into an interferometer. But then you've got the low-frequency ones, which are currently being built in Australia, and some of them look like these kind of metal spiders.
Like a bit like one of those
Yeah, metal spiders, and then some of them look like metal Christmas trees, and you've got this like kind of Christmas tree shape. And now there's balls. Like, how does that work? What?
We have the same question.
I know, but you preempted me.
And also, like, are you just rolling them and seeing how far they get apart, or
What's the plan here?
like
Details,
like,
Adriana.
have you planned your baselines, or are you just going to see how far they roll?
Is it like balls on the moon?
They were supposed to roll, that's the idea. So Carla's balls are going to the moon. That's the joke. Then
But
we
she's
were
got
told
3.
that our balls would not be inside the cargo hold, but they would be strapped to the outside of the
I know,
lander.
they're going to get cold.
We're like, what are you doing with our balls now? No, so
They shrink.
they're strapped to the outside. Strapped to the outside of the lander. We thought we would self-deploy. Then it became a question of, are we going to use some kind of you don't say the word
Okay.
explosives around
I think
people
that maybe we
preparing.
should take a question from the audience before this devolves any further.
No, but now there's a robot. So this is the nature of
Really?
working with the Chinese. So there's a Hong Kong team that's got a robot, and the robot has a hand, and the hand will pick the balls off the edge of the off the side
throw
of the
them.
lander and deploy them would be the. But yeah, the idea of the balls is indeed to roll, because the further away they are from each other, the bigger the effective size of the instrument is, and the more highly resolved or the more depth with which it's able to look into space. So in a nutshell.
That's cool.
I look forward to the press conference. Let's take a question from the audience, if there is one, because I think we could just geek out all day up here, and we're also here for you. So I can't see incredibly well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Up the back there.
the guy on the white
Yep.
shirt. Yep.
Hi. So this is a bit of a far afield, let's say, but obviously after we become an interplanetary civilization, we want to take the next leap. You know, it's a multi-billion-year project, given we have until our sun explodes, but we want to become an interstellar one, right? Like eventually. Don't you guys ever worry somewhat that like we might be dooming future generations to like, you know, an awful existence on like ships that never see a sun? I mean, I just always wonder about what's the upper limit of human space travel? Like, where do we kind of say, look, we've done enough?
We're not there yet, I think. I mean, we kind of we are on spaceship Earth at the moment, right? Stuck on this planet, you know, for better or worse. Beautiful planet, uniquely has life and liquid water, which is good. But we essentially are stuck on the spaceship Earth, roaming around in this very specific part of the universe. Well, we could go even further back and say when humanity emerged in Africa, we made our way across the surface of the whole planet because of changes in the environment, preempting migration, or just through pure exploration. So I say there are those two aspects of it. But the better you are at adapting to new environments and exploring new spaces sort of physically, the more hope you would have to survive a massive upheaval in environmental conditions. And I think early humans survived a lot worse than what we've seen now. When we talk about global warming and climate change now, it's fairly minor compared to the shifts that happened in humanity's past. So supervolcano eruptions, asteroid impacts, then triggering global ice ages, etc. This is something we've lived through. And if there was a bigger kind of asteroid impact, it may be that we wouldn't survive if we were stuck on Earth. And so preempting or developing the capability to explore other regions before such a disaster happens is always a good tool set to have ready. So eventually we may need to leave the solar system when the sun goes red giant, or maybe we can just move out further away from the inner planets. This is going to be in about 1 billion years. So we will need a revolution in propulsion systems to leave the solar system if we are planning on doing that. And what that might look like, we don't know. I mean, there is nuclear propulsion that we haven't fully, investigated or tested sufficiently. That could be the next wave of propulsion systems. But yeah, certainly we can already predict when we're going to need to leave the solar system. So I'd say that would be something we need to keep on the agenda. 1 billion years time.
We have some time.
Get ready to leave Earth. But in the larger scheme of things, that's not really that far away, because life on Earth has been around for 4 billion years. So then it's just like 20% of the track record of Earth life is left. And so we do have some time to start thinking about building genetic libraries, perhaps, on other celestial bodies. Even if life doesn't survive, at least we may have a database. Or then ourselves actually moving to a new location and getting good at doing that. Yeah, you were going even much further than that. like intergenerational journeys in interstellar space. Who knows? I think the learnings that we go through in the next billion years, I think, are difficult to predict. So maybe we would find a way to travel faster than the speed of light by then. Who knows? That seems to be the only real way in which to explore the universe, is to find a way to move faster than the speed of light. But with fundamental research being defunded in the way that it is now, who knows? Maybe we won't be around in a billion years to deal with that problem.
I think you'll always find that there's someone willing to put their hand up on one of those missions. One of them's on the stage with us now.
But great question. Maybe there's a book there too.
We had another question over here, was it?
My question is about the science and the capabilities and the link between your radio astronomy ball project and the SKA. How much was it rooted in the SKA, but also has it not in a way overtaken the SKA, the technology, because it will be doing what the SKA's plan to be doing and the SKA isn't quite finished yet? Or how do those two relate in terms of the technology and the cooperation?
I'll give a quick answer, and I'm sure Jacinta can give some more detail. Just the frequency bands that we are looking at are not the same as the SKA is aiming for. So we're looking at the lower frequency band, like below 10 megahertz, we'll probably go from 0 to 20. So the SKA is not built to look at this frequency range, so the data sets would be complementary in that way. The sheer scale of the SKA is not something we can even dream about competing with our balls at maybe like 100 meters apart, whereas the square kilometer array is obviously on that scale. So we wouldn't be competing, but it's been a fantastic series of events whereby South Africa won the bid to host the SKA.
Co-host.
And Minister Pandor at the time, I think, was instrumental in doing that. So often it does come back to the individuals who make it happen, because that facilitated Carla coming up with this idea for the balls. As an economist, radio astronomers told her these balls will never work, but she believed in it for now a decade, and now the balls are going to the moon to demonstrate their capabilities. So having the expertise and Carla, an economist passionate about space, being able to work in the funding business side of the SKA, having an eye on how to do international projects, and now this collaboration with China. So all steps in the puzzle. But yeah, we're so grateful to our team of volunteer engineers. I think the science part is so much easier than the engineering challenges that they are facing currently. And to have all of that expertise sitting here in sort of Cape Town and surrounds has really enabled us to do this in the first place.
Yeah. If you don't mind me commenting Please. A little bit. So yes, as Adriana said, it's quite complementary. First of all, in terms of we're looking at different frequency ranges. So the balls are very low frequency, and the SKA is from those low frequencies up to much higher frequencies. What does that mean? Well, you can study different science at different frequencies. For example, my research field is looking at hydrogen gas in distant galaxies. That is at about 1420 megahertz, which is very different to the 10 megahertz that the balls will look at. I also look at supermassive black holes in galaxies, again at much higher frequencies. And so you have different science and different things that you can see if you look at the universe at different wavelengths or different frequencies. The second thing is that you really want the most metal surface area possible with your telescopes in order to get better sensitivity, and that means you can see fainter things. So at the moment we'll only, I was speaking with Adriana earlier, and she was telling me that you can only see very, very, very bright things with the balls in the first stage at least. Whereas with the SKA we'll be able to, when it's built, at least the first phase, part of it built in Southern Africa, part built in Western Australia where I'm from, it'll be so sensitive that you'll be able to see really far back into the history of the universe, because if you look deeper into space, you're looking back in time, and so we'll be able to see a big fraction of the history of our universe, like a massive time machine. So it's a very different sort of science parameter space that we're both working on, so it absolutely makes sense to do both simultaneously.
And I don't think you'll ever hear an astronomer say, you know what, we don't need another telescope.
More.
Do we have another question?
Okay. I just wanted to understand your previous answer. Did you just shift perspective somewhere in your answer by saying that we are actually, at the moment, we are on a intergenerational spaceship? So we are actually traveling through space. And what will happen if we do, then it's almost like jumping ship. So creating another bubble. So this bubble that we're living on at the moment is very fragile in any case. So any other bubble that you create will be as fragile. And then what we have at the moment is we're on a spaceship that is traveling in a direction which is kind of, we can't control. So when we do or ever reach interplanetary or interstellar travel, we'll just be choosing the direction in which we travel. Did I understand it correctly?
I should have said that. That was beautifully put. Yeah, intergenerational spaceship Earth. I like that. Well, you coined it. Yeah, well put. And what is the end point of this intergenerational spaceship? Yeah, it's fairly robust given its volume of resources, both inanimate and living. But yeah, that's the task. And I think in some sense, reflecting on the process of the last 4 billion years in a Martian context, for example, where you start to build this bubble from scratch, I think is an interesting stage of human development, interesting stage in human advancement, is to really reflect on the original bubble and then look at the challenges of producing a new one. And I think our level of understanding of, finding yourself on a planet like Earth and then really reflecting on that and trying to reproduce those conditions elsewhere, I think is a really important learning curve. And who knows what will emerge or what kind of society will emerge out of that learning. But that was beautifully put.
This lady's had her hand up for a while.
Thank you. Other than playing Terraforming Mars with Jacinta, I know nothing about this topic. But you spoke a lot about the moon, and throughout this conversation, time has come up in different ways. So I'm interested in now, given that I live in 2025. You're speaking about going to the moon and putting resources on the moon, and you mentioned that we're linked, Earth is obviously linked to the moon. What effects are we expecting to see from that? Like adding resources to the moon, things like that.
So on a practical level, I think at some point I did a calculation to say if we mined with the same volume of extraction as a mine on Earth, like the whole of the moon, how long would it take until the moon was mass was reduced sufficiently enough that the orbit around the Earth would change? And that didn't seem to be possible. It was like we have to mine for 1 million years before the moon gets. So physically, the impact we have on the moon is not going to change the mass enough to make any real difference. There's a drift happening anyway, but that wouldn't be due to our activities. So yeah, because maybe what she's saying is that we do feel there's a slight, is there an ethical objection to what we're doing here? Is the moon not sacred as is? But when I think about that, I reflect on the fact that Earth is unique in hosting life. And maybe we deserve actually to live on a planet that doesn't have any life, where we really have to do everything from scratch. Maybe that's, the situation we're kind of starting to put ourselves in here, is to say we are separate from nature. We don't need these natural systems to be flourishing for us to flourish. And what we're watching is the answer to that, which is no. You can't do that. But maybe we deserve to live on Mars, where there is no life, where we have to produce our own oxygen. We don't have a whole bunch of organisms doing it for us, where we have to think very carefully about bringing seeds from Earth because we don't know how to 3D print seeds and the food doesn't grow by itself, etc., etc. So the ethics of space exploration, I think the most important ethical topic there is how we treat our planet Earth and all the species that we cohabit Earth with. So whatever we do beyond Earth, I hope it always comes back to that, of becoming better stewards of Earth. Our planet's unique in hosting liquid water. This is not unrelated to the fact that it's teeming with life. None of the other planets in the solar system have these conditions. So perhaps to truly appreciate what we have here on Earth, we have to develop our knowledge of what's beyond Earth. And so maybe those two come together.
I have more of a literary question, speaking to that side of you. So I think while you've been sitting here and talking about everything you guys have been talking about, it's fascinating, and it makes me think of some of the best sci-fis out there, like The Expanse, Star Trek, and especially how if we think of Star Trek and the automatically opening doors came from envisioning that first in a sci-fi. So my question is twofold. One, what role do you think African literature has in contributing towards the ideas about African space exploration? And what advice would you give to a writer, a sci-fi writer, not in STEM, who wants to write a scientifically informed manuscript?
Wow, that's a great question. I don't know if I'm equipped to answer it. Maybe I'll pass.
You're the science author.
That's a beautiful question. I mean, my simple answer would be like, we have to be at the table so that these kinds of things can happen. So in my small way, and Carla Sharp-Mitchell, by the way, is the mission director, so I'm really assisting her in this, my old great friend and now collaborator. This is her project that we're bringing to life here. So I think in our small way, we're just making sure that Africa has a place at the table, because if we left it up to government organizations, we still wouldn't have a mission beyond Earth orbit. And what typically happens to Africa in the African context is we become customers like 20 years after the technology is developed. So by just putting this like tiny little set of balls on the moon, somehow we're just making sure that we have a seat at the table, that the kinds of technological development that needs to happen for lunar exploration is something that Africa participates in, that companies and universities and whatever are just thinking about how they can perhaps contribute. I've gone completely off the literary part, but just having this project existing, I think, is hopefully enough that it does inspire some young writers out there to start looking into new genres, perhaps, and then impacting the way space exploration itself plays out. So I'm a big believer in participation and having a seat at the table, and then I think these kind of creative byproducts happen naturally from the kind of physical exploration that we do. If that made sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot happening, and I mean, Adriana's talking about some of it in this Africa to Moon project, and there's a lot happening in Africa, which is interesting, and from a literary point of view too. The experience I have of African literature and African sci-fi literature is I'm now friendly with a guy in Nigeria who's an award-winning sci-fi writer globally, and he emails me every few months with a set of questions, and we have a little Zoom, and he's like, "Is this real? Like, can I say this?" And you know, I'm not volunteering myself. I have a lot to do, but you know, like there are a lot of experts out there. There's a lot of like people who are knowledgeable and who are willing to help.
I'll consult.
Yeah. At the moment, I don't
like
charge. This is the problem.
for like shares in the future book.
So yeah, I think that there's a lot of science communicators out there. There's a lot of astronomers who are very like passionate about science communication and who would love to be involved in this sort of thing. So, you know, I think that my approach always is just to ask people for help, for advice, and see, like, you know, every now and again you hit someone who's really willing.
In terms of space stuff, you can always go to the open nights at the South African Astronomical Observatory, and you'll meet a lot of astronomers there, both amateur astronomers and professional astronomers, and you can always get connections there, and people are always enthusiastic and they love talking about their subject matter, so I don't think you'll find it difficult to engage.
And listen to the Cosmic Savannah podcast. Yeah.
On YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also www.thecosmicsavannah.com.
I'll have to find it for you. Yeah, I can send it to you. Who's next? I think we've probably got time for like one more question.
Yeah. Down here, right here. Just wait for the microphone.
One more question, Carl.
Thank you.
You got a list there.
Well, I just one observation. I mean, we saw in the film, in the book, The Martian, the fantasy that you could just fertilize the Martian regolith and grow things in it, which is not the way it works. But I'm wondering, the question about multi-generational and sustainability. Now that we could maintain a colony by supporting it is one thing, versus that it becomes self-sufficient. And until we know that humans can reproduce in these places, it's a big question mark. But I'm wondering, we're the product of evolutionary processes that don't stop just because we've achieved civilization. So what if our future destiny is not that our biological offspring is what inhabits the cosmos beyond the Earth, but our intellectual offspring, like artificial intelligence? Would that be such a terrible thing?
Yeah, because then I wouldn't get to go. It's possible that robotics advances sufficiently to do a lot of the experimentation that we may have in mind on, for example, the surface of Mars. But I think then we lose a lot of the richness of the benefits and perspective shift and advancement of knowledge that comes through the experience of existing on another planet close to Earth. And then we move away from the scientific things and talk about the cultural advancements and the perspective shifts and things I've said already. So I believe the act of exploring itself is intrinsically tied to the knowledge advancement that comes from, observational knowledge of that place. And so the sustainability, well, in a practical way, okay, that's quite a beautiful question that I could talk about, but probably I wouldn't do it in public, so maybe I should write about that rather beautiful question. But on a practical level, I think the people living on Mars, like spacefaring natives, would look naturally up and see asteroids. So some of the larger asteroids would be visible in the night sky from Mars. And this leads us into that the asteroid belt would be closer accessible to Mars than it would be to Earth. So it may be that people living on Mars start to extract resources from the asteroid belt before Earth does, perhaps because it's easier to collect smaller rocks, perhaps some kind of net-like structure where you then transport them to the surface of Mars, maybe an easier way to get to metals than to dig to the core of Mars as we've done here on Earth. So it could be the case that, in fact, Earth is importing resources from Mars that's extracting them from the asteroid. Okay, and now I'm talking about The Expanse, which is a really brilliant series. And I think a lot of thought was put into that geopolitical context some hundreds of years into the future of how things may look in terms of resources again, and resources being tied to sustainability. But then you get all the complex trade and economics and that coming in, and then it becomes very difficult to predict. And even in the book, I do touch on blockchain and cryptocurrencies as having recently emerged, which is maybe a natural way to think about trade between different planets. But I could carry on.
I'm sure we could keep going.
There's a lot
for
of
a long
that question.
time.
Thank you. Yeah.
But for more of your questions, you might be able to find them out in the book. So I think that's a nice segue. Thank you for joining us today, everybody. Buy the book, Out of This World and Into the Next, Notes from a Physicist on Space Exploration by Adriana Marais, which you can buy and also get the author herself to sign for you downstairs in the marketplace today. Thank you very much, Adriana, for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the festival.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Daniel.
everyone.
Thanks, Jacinta.
Thank you.